This is Shakti Peeth. We are starting this retreat on a Friday. Traditionally, we regard Friday the day of Divine Mother, and it is a matter of joy that today is also Ekadashi. Traditionally, Ekadashi is a day very dear to Lord Vishnu, and we are starting the study of Sri Krishna's Bhagavad Gita on an Ekadashi. Let us begin with the first three dhyana shlokas of Bhagavad Gita. Most of you know. There are 9 of them, you know, starting with Parthaya Pratibodhitam. However, the first 3 offer their devotional salutations to Bhagavad Gita as a holy text, then Sri Veda Vyasa, and the third one is to Lord Sri Krishna. Please join me, all of you know the shlokas, so we can go together. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshiniim Bhagavatim Ashtadashaadhyayiniim Amba Tvamanusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshiniim Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Tullarvindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipa Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha. Salutations to Mother Gita, salutations to Sri Veda Vyasa, and salutations to Sri Krishna. We have chosen to study together certain selected verses of chapter 2 from 11th to 30th, which means we shall study these 20 verses. It has been rightly said by those who travelled to Ambaji on the train, they met some people, and with a touch of humor it was said that we are going to meet Yamraj. For we have called this retreat Dialogue with Death. For Nachiketa has a dialogue with Lord of Death, who is Lord Yama. But what does the Lord of Death talk about? He touches upon the deathless. And Sri Krishna also here in these selected verses precisely covers the great teachings of the Upanishads about the deathless, the Avinashi. At several places in the Gita, especially as it comes to my mind, in the 13th chapter, the Lord uses this very poetic expression. The wise are able to see the deathless amidst death. Vinashyatsu avinashyantam yap pashyati sa pashyati. So we are here to shake hands with Lord Yama, surely in the morning classes, and we are here to receive the message of Sri Krishna on the deathless, which means the timeless truth. In Sanskrit language, the word kala means time and it also means death. Time is death. The phenomenal world is a movement in time. Everything changes. Moment to moment, everything changes. When we say everything, the outer world also changes and we also are changing. Why blame the outer world? Why say, oh, this is very bad, she changed her mind, he changed his mind, and the place changed, and so on. Why blame him or her or the place or some object? Do we remain the same? When somebody comes to us and says, you had said this, we with a slight apology or sometimes without even apology or shame, say to them, yeah, but my mind changed now. I have changed my mind. For this I, this sense of me, is also a part of the same Prakriti. So what is not I also changes, and what we usually take to be I also changes. The message of the Vedanta is behind and beneath what we usually take or mistake to be I, there is a true I. That is called Atma. Who am I? We ask. Ordinarily we get an answer, I am so and so. And in every retreat and every program, I bear with an introduction of me. Everybody nowadays, even young chartered accountants who are good in keeping account of everything, with a mic in hand declare he was born. Following that, I have to say that nothing is born. Sri Krishna says nobody is born, nobody dies. But chartered accountants keep account. When is anybody born, when is anybody gone, and when they are gone, how their property is to be divided. And so on and so forth. Why blame only chartered accountants? In fact, all of us are chartered accountants. In the sense, all of us keep account. You mean anybody among us is not interested in property around us? If some property by some chance is likely to come to us, maybe to build an ashram, you think we are not going to receive it or we are not going to accept it? So we all keep account. We keep account and others keep account of us also. So on one plane, it is all chartered accountancy only. All of us are doing, professionals do in a very meticulous way, and some of us keep accounts in a haphazard way. It is more a mess than anything understandable. Sri Krishna or the Vedanta teaches us that which is untouched by time, untouched by death, that which cannot be brought in the framework of any accounting, which all of us had better take note of. The message of the Lord here is very alarming. As we call it, it's a wake-up call. It is a call, it's an appeal to every one of us, and the gist of it is, all right, you are generally taking account of everything, but do you know that you are actually the immeasurable? You are so given to measurement. Measure money, measure time, measure objects, measure weight, measure length, mass, time, and so on. In physics they have something called LMT analysis, dimensional analysis they call it, and the basic three dimensions are LMT, length, mass and time. Then there are some more also. Anything and everything is expressed as one of these three, or all these three, L, M and T. So life generally is all about measurement. When I studied engineering, there was a whole subject, measurements, electronic measurements, and there was a book which we were looking at as a Bible of the topic of measurement, and the author had a strange habit. Every second page he would begin a paragraph saying, now it is of interest to measure some parameter. Now it is of interest to measure the resistance some other place. Now it is of interest to measure the capacitance. Some other place he would say, now it is of interest to measure the mass, because it is all about measuring. But the way he begins his paragraph, that author, was with this expression, now it is of interest to measure. And once when I borrowed that book from our college library in Davangere, somebody had already marked with a pencil on that book, everywhere where the author wrote or began, now it is of interest to measure. This student who had borrowed it before underlined it and wrote, now it is of interest to whom? To whom is it of interest to measure the whatever component, whatever quantity? We are fed up of this book. Why did you find out so many things? We are fed up of these Newtons and Einsteins, and they found out so much, and we have the misery of studying it all. So students curse sometimes all these scientists, though at times we thoroughly appreciate, wow, this never occurred to me, beautiful. Every subject is beautiful. So measurement, the Western civilization especially is given the credit of being very meticulous in measuring. We generally say the West has advanced in science and technology, and East apparently has gone very deep in what is immeasurable. In meditation, in our philosophical pursuits, we in fact with great carefulness avoid measurement, even as our good old conditioned mind is once more all set to measure. To measure also means to judge. To judge means to label. This is good, that is bad. She is nice, he is horrible. That was very wonderful, and this is so unpleasant. The mind is about to come to a conclusion, and the Eastern philosophical pursuits question that very tendency to judge. So in the Vedanta we talk about Sakshi Bhava, staying as the witness, and one of the aspects of being the witness is not to measure, not to judge. Let the dirtiest of thoughts come. Is it possible for me to watch that thought without reacting, without saying, oh, what a terrible thought? You must have heard somewhere or from me, a Christian priest asked the parishioner, tell me, son, do you sometimes entertain vulgar thoughts? The innocent, poor parishioner thought for a moment and said, Father, it's the other way around, they entertain me. So, we entertain sometimes vulgar thoughts. Sometimes the worst, the most vulgar thoughts come during meditation only. In the temple we get some dirty thought, whatever it is, money or pleasure or whatever. And in the bazaar sometimes we get divine thoughts, because this mind does not care where we are. We are in the bazaar or we are at some notorious place, known for wrong things, let us say, but there we may have some divine thoughts of loving all, forgiving all, and so on. The Sakshi Bhava, witness consciousness or witness state, requires not to judge at all, leave alone indulging in it. First you say this is a vulgar thought, and then you perhaps indulge in it or resist it, try to go away from it or to get more into it, whatever. Is it possible for us not to judge at all? Or thanks to an old habit, if we have judged it, is it possible not to do anything more? Okay, this is a noble thought, but let me not get more into it. Let me not further comment, what a wonderful thought, I think I am almost near one of those saints. In this way we could compliment ourselves, pat ourselves on the back. Or if it is a dirty thought, we might say, shh, not in this life, I will be nowhere near so-called realization. With this kind of terrible, horrible thoughts coming to me with such force, I do not stand the least chance of anywhere near mukti. This is a further comment. First you had a bad thought and then you made a comment about it. All this is accounting, all this is measuring. And the deathless truth which Sri Krishna, the Lord of joy, the Lord of love, the Lord of divine life, talks about, and which is the same thing the Lord of death also talks about. Lord of death and Lord of life both talk about the deathless truth. Please do not think that Kathopanishad classes will be all about dying and dying and dying. Rather, it is to come upon that which does not die. So, in these 20 verses, there is really no need to give a background. Everybody knows. One of my Swami friends, of course, says, Gita, everybody knows Gita. I said, what? Bhagavad Gita is what Arjun Singh taught, rather Arjun Singh received from S.K. Yadav. When some fight was going on, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar are known for great fights all the time. So S.K. Singh was, Arjun Singh was disturbed. Then S.K. Yadav, Sri Krishna Yadav came and said, don't be so disturbed. So what S.K. Yadav taught Arjun Singh is Gita. This is how Swami Anubhavananda describes it. So I am not going to introduce what Bhagavad Gita is and the whole story of Mahabharata. So we will plunge into the teachings proper. So let us begin. Please repeat after me, though you know the shlokas well, yet first time you repeat, then we sing together. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Ashocyananvashocastvam Prajnavadanscha bhashase Gatasuna Nanushocanti panditaah. Together. Ashocyananvashocastvam Prajnavadanscha bhashase Gatasuna Nanushocanti panditaah. Sri Bhagavan, in Sanskrit, Bhaga means a form of wealth, and the scriptures say there are 6 forms of wealth. Some 6 forms: knowing all, ruling over all, great compassion, and some other qualities are considered 6 forms of Bhaga. And one who has all the 6, that means all forms of wealth, you name it, that sampatti is in Lord Sri Krishna. He owns it all. He has everything with him, therefore he is Bhagavan. Not just the well-known forms of material wealth. In fact, when the scriptures deal with such topics, they go about it from such a broad angle of view. One of the greatest forms of wealth is Vairagya. Vairagya Samrajya it is called. If you have Vairagya, that is non-attachment, you are Shah and Shah, emperor of emperors. For the state of desirelessness is the ultimate bliss. When they asked Sri Ramana Maharshi, is desirelessness the means to freedom? He said, desirelessness is freedom. Don't even say it is the means with whose help you will reach somewhere. You are desireless, over, job is done. It is the greatest wealth, and that is also included in the enumeration of forms of wealth. So Lord Krishna is absolutely desireless. Name parthasti karthavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nanavaptam avaptavyam varta evacha karmani is a shloka which perhaps came earlier or will come later. I think comes later. Just now Lord has begun his advice. Yeah, comes later, where he says, Arjun, I actually have nothing to do in 3 worlds. I have no work at all. I have no list of things to do. By not doing, where by not doing one gets into trouble. You and I carry so many lists of things to do. I myself am very good in making lists of things to do, but I never like to look at them again. I write in pieces of paper, diaries, books. If you present me a new book of diary of 2012, I like those fresh pages. And I leave behind all my earlier lists of things to do and start writing in this book. And those old books or old pieces of paper, etc., they are all there around me. If you come to my cottage in Varanasi, and when I am away, suppose you search my room, you will get things to do lists everywhere. below the bed, below the pillow, everywhere. I know they are there, but I don't like to read them. I make a fresh list. Hundreds of things to do. I make lists and I then completely forget. If you ever wonder how I am so calm, it is this total forgetfulness. I forget that there are things to do and I am very happy. Morning, half an hour in the morning every day, I get very tense because that is when I remember everything that needs to be done. Then I become all right. After a cup of tea, completely I forget till next morning. During the day, I do things which newly come. I don't attend to anything which I had decided to do before. I promise people, that also I forget. But if they call me at 10 o'clock, then I attend to it. Otherwise, I forget. Not out of insincerity. It is out of divine forgetfulness. God has given me that gift. Promise sincerely, but forget not out of insincerity. I am not insincere. I just forget. I don't know why. I forget. Or it's not there in my consciousness. I look at, the beautiful lawn and I feel so happy. I just see the lawn. Things to do are forgotten. So Lord Krishna said in that sloka, or will say in the Gita, Name partasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana. It's not because of forgetfulness. In his case, it is complete fullness. He is full. He is adequate. He is purna. In fact, he does not forget. He does everything in time, well in time. When Yaksha asked Yudhishthira in Mahabharata, what is dharma? Normally we say, dharma is satya is dharma, ahimsa is dharma. What else? Daya is dharma. There are so many virtues. That is virtue, dharma, righteousness. Very interestingly, in Yaksha Prashna, the famous portion of Mahabharata, the answer is different. Dakshyameka padam dharmaha. If in one word we have to say what is dharma, this is good for all so-called value-based management. Yudhishthira's answer is efficiency, doing things well in time, doing things promptly, keeping your promises. Dakshyam, dakshata, So dakshata, that is dakshyam, is ekapadam dharma, he says in Yaksha Prashna. So Lord Krishna is embodiment of dharma. He does not keep any promise unfulfilled. So when he says, I have nothing to do, it means he has absolutely no sense of guilt or shame or fear or pressure or who will do this, last date is coming nearby, they are going to call now, that kind of, you and I go through, this pressure. He has no such fear or pressure. He is completely at ease. Na anavaptam, there is nothing about which he feels, oh, I haven't got it. And na avaptavyam, there is nothing about which he feels, I must get it. That means there is no incompleteness. And yet, the punchline in that shloka is varte eva. Yet I keep busy. That is the opposite of inefficient people. Inefficient people, though there are 100 things to do, don't do anything, they keep singing a song. And Lord, though he has nothing to do, he is full, he can afford to relax. He doesn't have to lift a blade of grass. Yet, varte eva cha karmani. Yet I keep busy. What's the explanation? What motivates the Lord? What drives the Lord? Or in place of Lord, any wise person. Or in place of any wise person out there, when you and I are in that state of consciousness called wisdom, it's in us. Any moment we could come to that state of consciousness. When we are wise, when we are in the state of wisdom, then it is not a reward that motivates us, not some carrot at the end of the stick, but it is love. Varta eva cha karmani is a statement of love. I work for I love. I love work, I love people, I love subjects, I love things, I love. Like all those bathroom singers. Nobody is hearing them, but they go on singing. Though they have finished their bath, because there is one more stanza in the song, they continue. And because when they finish that last stanza of the song, they remembered another. They started it, again they continue to take bath. Till in joint families this used to be a big problem. Nowadays it's not, everyone has attached bathrooms and not much of a problem. In olden days most of us have grown up in such homes where there would be 23 people in the same house and only one bathroom. That too outside the house. There were all these orthodox beliefs in our good old homes. You should not have bathroom and toilet in the house. It should be a separate building with the open space in between. Otherwise you are not cultured and so on. To have a bathroom right in the house, that too next to the puja room, etc., was considered in good old days very wrong, uncultured. So only one bathroom, and this great bathroom singer is not finishing his bath. So people would go and bang that door. Then out of compassion he would come out, he or she. Now these bathroom singers, they sing out of love only. There is no audience, no judge, no award promised, but they just enjoy, right? Is it possible for all of us to be efficient, to do everything just out of love? Yes, it is, and that is what Sri Krishna means. And such Sri Krishna, who has absolute freedom, advises Arjuna here. The shloka begins with this piece of advice: O Arjuna, you do not have to grieve, you do not have to cry. Swami Akhandanandaji, based on this shloka and practically, though not literally the last shloka of the Bhagavad Gita, literally the last shloka, 78th shloka of 18th chapter, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Partho, that shloka is last. But otherwise, practically, Sri Krishna teachings conclude in the Gita, in the 18th chapter, with the shloka Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Ahantva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shucha. Sri Swami Akhandanandaji, the most wonderful teacher of Vrindavan, at one of the places in his commentaries, in a delightful mood says, Bhagavad Gita begins with Ashocyan Anvashochastvam. You are crying over matters which don't require any crying, which don't call for any sorrow at all, and conclude with Ma Shuchaha, which means don't cry. So don't cry is the beginning, don't cry is the end. Therefore, he says the Tatparya, the message, the central message of the Bhagavad Gita is do not cry. And there only he says Bhagavad Gita is Ashokopanishad, like Ishopanishad and Kenopanishad and all that. You may call this Gita Ashokopanishad, for it says there has to be no shoka. Shoka is false. Shoka is a sign of sorrow. There was a gentleman who was principal of Rishi Valley School for 20 years. His memoirs are in fact getting officially published or released at this time only in Chennai. Today there is a function. Memoirs of Dr. Balasundaram, who was principal of Rishi Valley School of Krishnamurti Foundation, India in Andhra Pradesh between 1958 and 1977. I got an advance copy. I was in Chennai 3 days back from those who compiled it. In that there is a chapter. If you are hurt, there is some misunderstanding in you. You are confused, therefore you are hurt. If you are clear, you will never be hurt. Whenever you are hurt in some relationship, in some transaction, you feel hurt, you feel let down, you experience great pain in your heart. How could, of all people, he do this to me? How could she say this to me? How could they, who have known me for 12 years now, do this to me, etc. We feel hurt. Spiritually speaking, with all due respect to your knowledge, intelligence, learning and everything, from a spiritual point of view, when you are hurt, it is your misunderstanding, not the other person's work. Your lack of love, your lack of broad-mindedness, your inability to see things from a larger point of view or larger angle of view. You are unable to see the larger picture, or you say loudly, they did not understand me, they did not understand me. The truth of the matter is you did not understand the other person. You had false expectations, or you had expectations where you had no business to expect. You should not have expected, but you imagined. You imagined that he loves me, he values me, he regards me. I think I am the most important person in his life. I think I am closer to him than anybody else, you know. I am convinced of it, of course. Like this, you danced, you sang, you wrote in your own personal diary, you told all your friends, and one day you found out that he doesn't think of you at all. Maybe you asked one day with a rose in hand, or whatever way, it need not be romantic, in some other setting too. What do you think of me? He said, I don't think of you. Question of what doesn't arise, he doesn't think, you are not in his consciousness. You know. Then you say, now he came out in his true colors. You start blaming him. Poor fellow, he was in his own world, and it's not at fault, he was in his own world. You imagined that you were in, he was in your world or you are in his world, but the truth of the matter is, he has his own story, his own past. You and I are all, right? We are all our past. We are sitting here on February 3, 2012, but hardly any of us is in February 3, 2012. We are all carrying baggages. Lord Krishna says, Gita says, we are beyond time. But our ego is totally in the clutches of time. The self. J. Krishnamurti referred to it always as the self, with a small s, not the capital S of Vedanta. The self. The self is caught in time. The self is caught in thoughts. It is caught in memories. And what is hurt is the ego, is the self, is the past. If you and I are able to stay in the present, there is no hurt. We are in the past, we are caught in the past. We neither see ourselves as we are, nor do we see the other person as he is or she is. We see the other person also heavily in the medium of our memories. If one of you looks like, let us say, my uncle, I start looking at you as my uncle, knowing very well you are not my uncle. But your eyes and a little bit your nose look like my uncle's eyes and uncle's nose. That is enough for me. That is a trigger that launches a procession of memories. यादों की बारात निकलती है. Your eyes and your nose look like my uncle's. That's it. Nothing else. But then my memories, right? On one hand, I think of that uncle of mine, and then what is further? After the class, or leaving everybody else, I come to you and, what is your name? Where are you from? You are also embarrassed. Why is Swamiji taking so much interest in me? Then one day, maybe third day, I say, I've been getting close to you because you look like my uncle. But am I your uncle? No, you are not, but you look like my uncle. And I have a lot of memories of my uncle. हमें क्यों सताते हैं आप? सताना नहीं है. Do we do that? Apply it everywhere else. Even your love of Gita also, to a great extent, could be some memories. Do you love the teachings of the Gita? Or is it a memory that your grandfather used to read Gita every morning and you love your grandfather and now you want to be like your grandfather? Your mother used to read Gita and you love your mother and therefore you want to hold Gita in hand out of an attachment to your mother. The Hindus therefore read Gita only, they have no interest in the Bible. The Christians read Bible only, no matter what Bhagavad Gita has in it, they will have no interest in the Gita, because the sense of my religion, my holy book, my God, my teacher is there in every one of us. We are helpless about it. The sense of my, look at it, is involved even in the study of the Gita, which is trying to remove us or remove that sense of my from us. Be free of I, me and my, says the Bhagavad Gita. We are deeply touched. Then we tell our Christian friends, my Bhagavad Gita is giving the message to freedom. And the Christian friend asks, what is that message? Very simple. Your Bible may not be saying it. My Bhagavad Gita says, if you are totally free of all sense of I and my, then you will be at peace. My Gita says that. So the sense of my, you drive away this ghost from the front door, it enters again through the back door or the window. There is a saying to that effect. So, when Sri Krishna says to Arjuna, Ashocyan anvashochaha, you are crying over what ought not to be cried over, the reference is to, dear Arjun, you are caught in certain heavily conditioned patterns of thinking. You have lost objectivity. You have lost simple, direct perception. You are a victim of colored perception. But you speak big things. Pradnavadanscha, pradnavadaha. Vada means speaking, words. Pradna is wisdom. You are speaking words of wisdom. Big words. For in the earlier 10 shlokas, of course some of them were in the mouth of Sanjaya or Sri Krishna himself, but couple of them were in Arjuna's mouth, and more than that, the whole first chapter, Arjuna spoke a lot, continuously. He took it out of his chest and painted a very dark picture of what would happen if he were to fight the war. The whole society would be ruined. We will go to hell, and this is not virtuous at all. War is so unkind, cruel. So he decried war, and that really sounds very wise. To say war is evil is of course wise to say. Therefore, in one sense they are wise words, but alas, Sri Krishna can see through the game. If Arjuna were to say those things out of objectivity, then Lord Krishna would be the first person to hold Arjuna's hand and say, I am also coming with you. Let us get away from here, this nonsense. We will not be part of this nonsense. Let us go away. But Sri Krishna sees very clearly that these words, however wise they may appear to be, are coming from an escapism, an escapist tendency, not out of objectivity, not out of clear vision. Therefore, Prajnavadan Bhashase, you speak very wise looking words, but you are not wise. Swami Chinmayananji often said, in this world there are a few people who are wise, others are otherwise. You are wise, others are otherwise. Or when you think you are wise, double check, are you wise or otherwise? You won't say unwise, otherwise. If you were to be truly wise, then you would not cry. Panditah. The word Panda in Sanskrit means wisdom, right knowledge. Anybody who has Panda is Pandita. In the Gita, just 2 or 3 times the word Pandita comes. Another place, Panditaha Samadarshinaha. Maybe that's the only other place. 2 places. The word Pandita comes twice in the Bhagavad Gita. It doesn't refer to any Brahmin or Kashmiri Pandit or any other Pandit. Vikram Pandit, he heads a bank, I guess. Which bank? City Bank, Vikram Pandit. And there are so many Pandits. So, this Pandita is not a reference to any music Pandit or Sanskrit Pandit or caste Pandit or some other kind of. There are many ways of usage of the word Pandit. Here it is one of pure spiritual wisdom. In other words, Brahmajnani. Panditaha na anushocanti. But the truly wise do not cry over either the dead, gatasu, or agatasu. Asu means prana. So gatasu is gata prana and agatasu is agata prana. Those whose pranas have left their body, that is the dead ones, are gatasus. Those whose pranas have not left, or you want to add not yet left, one day they have to live. Nobody will ever be alive. Agatasu. So, very strange way of putting it. The wise do not cry over either the dead or the living, which means they do not cry over anything. There are only these two categories. A guru said to his student after teaching him for 2 years, all right, you have now all the wisdom, now go serve the world, share your Bhagavad Gita wisdom with people. But as you go to various places, teach Gita, Upanishad, Ramayana and so on, lot of people will come to you, attend your talks, they will give you delicious food, they will put shawl upon you, they will take care of you, they will give big dakshinas, they will build ashram for you and so on, and there is the risk. Sadhus always run this risk, a professional risk. There is the risk of, as they show a lot of love to you, love and respect, they will touch your feet and what not. The Guru advised lovingly, there is the risk of you are getting attached. And he said, do not get attached to two categories of people, to females and to males. Do not get attached to females, do not get attached to males. Rest of it is okay. Get attached to kursi and mej, tables and chairs, carpets and microphone, Purna Kumbha. Hold that coconut and mere pyare nariyal. Don't get attached to men, don't get attached to women. But every poor brahmachari's case is the same. He gets attached to men and women and nothing else. Is it easy to get not attached? To not get attached or not to get attached is next to impossible. You have heard that case of a school test where you had to fill up the blank. Cleanliness is next to and a blank was given. The girl was supposed to fill up godliness. The girl filled up, cleanliness is next to impossible. So it is like that with non-attachment. I am telling you out of experience of 25 years. 86 I came out of Sandipani Sadhanalaya. Powai. Then in 2002 I left Powai, thinking that here I could not be free of attachment. Started Powai. Now also I am not free. Attachment is a ghost that goes out of the front door. In no time it comes in through the back door. Wherever you go. Go to Himalayas, go to the depth of Atlantic Ocean, anywhere you go, you will get attached. Somewhere, somehow. So Sri Krishna saying, the wise do not get attached to either the dead or the living, to me seems a very humorous way of expressing. That is how I think it was said, Tamuvacha Hrishikeshaha Prahasanniva Bharata. With a mischievous smile on his face, he is saying, Sri Krishna smiles. You think he smiles at Arjuna? With Arjuna as the excuse, pretext, he is smiling at every one of us. He is already smiling at us. All these years, everywhere and anywhere, you could not get my message. At Ambaji, what's going to happen? क्या होने वाला है? Sri Krishna is already laughing first at the speaker, Mahabuddhu, then at the audience, also Buddhus. All right, one more tamasha, do it. It appears. Anyway, take a deep breath. Let us try to give a surprise to Sri Krishna. At Ambaji camp at last, a little non-attachment we collected. Let us try to. So now he gives the message of the deathless. Natve vaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadhipaha न चैव न भविष्यामः सर्वे वयमतः परम् न त्वेवाहं जातु नासं न त्वं नेमे जनाधिपाः न चैव न भविष्यामः सर्वे वयमतः परम्. Again, a very different or a novel way of putting. The language itself is, shall we say, poetic, puzzlesome, very out of the way. Rather than saying, Arjuna, all of us are immortal, all of us have always been here. That is the positive language. All of us have been here, are here, will be here. We never went, we never. He uses a double negative language. Natu eva aham jatu na asam. Aham na asam means I did not exist. I did not exist is one negation. Double negation is na aham na asam. Na aham na asam. It is not right to say that I ever did not exist. It is not right, it is not true to say that I was ever absent, which means I always was. Again, natvam neme janadipaha. It is not true to say that you were ever non-existent. It is not true to say that these kings, Jana Adipa, these kings, Jananam Adipaha, Janadipaha, Rajanaha, kings. It is not true to say that these kings sometime in the past did not exist. So, double negation, which means I always was, you always were, and these kings always were. In the same way, na chaiva, one negation, na bhavishyamaha, second negation. It is not true to say that we will not exist. It is not true to say that you will not exist. It is not true to say these kings will not exist. That means in future too, you, me and these kings will ever be. We were and we will be, and by implication. All this implies, or by implication, we are is an evident truth. There is no logic needed. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, at the moment Sri Krishna was teaching this, all the warriors soldiers on Kaurava and Pandava sides were very much present. It's like when people asked Ramana Maharshi, does God exist? Maharshi said, tell me first, do you exist? The visitor doesn't have to reply. The visitor exists, is a self-evident truth. So that kind of counter question is of the nature of answering in an indirect way. Does God exist? First tell me, do you exist? And if you exist, God also exists. So, all of us were, all of us will be, and of course all of us are. That means we are deathless. So, before we meet Yamaraj tomorrow morning, we already have received an assurance from Lord Krishna that there is no fear. It is as though he is telling us, you are meeting Yamaraj tomorrow morning, do not fear. Meet him with a smile. You will not die. Sarve vayam atap param. Atap param is in future. Here onwards. Bhavishyamaha already by the words tense. Bhavishyamaha is a future tense verb that already means future, but to put it in black and white, atap param. Here onwards. Ataha means starting from here, param is onwards. Starting from here onwards into 2013 and 14, 15 and 16 and on and on. So this verse, which has been expressed in a poetic manner, is the summary in fact of the 20 verses we are studying here in 6 afternoons. It is the summary or is the central point. No one dies. If you have self-knowledge, as the Vedanta uses the word self-knowledge with a capital S, knowing your true nature, then there is no death at all. Rest of it is elaboration. It is to either express the central truth in a few other ways so that it may become more appealing, it may convince us, and really speaking conviction is not enough at all, because conviction is still at the argumentative level. When you have no arguments against something, and what is more, you have several arguments in favor of something. Opposite arguments are defeated and favorable arguments are supplied in plenty. Then you are convinced. But as Kathopanishad will have a statement which we will be seeing, Naisha tarkena matirapaneya. A famous line of Kathopanishad is, this mati, this understanding is never obtained by tarka. Esha matihi tarkena na prapaniya. Naisha tarkena matirapaneya is a famous, much quoted line. The organizers have supplied to you a highlighter this time. Powai Forum is making several improvements, fine tuning camps, because in Kathopanishad and in Bhagavad Gita there are some punch lines. So you are supposed to highlight that punch line. So one of the punch lines that will come now in Kathopanishad is Naisha tarkena matirapaneya, which has lot of significance. In fact, sometimes I Why talk of myself? Anybody, you also. When you study scriptures, you will feel, why are we going on studying? Is this just this line is enough? Hold this line and just stay with this line. Close the book and sit quietly in contemplation. Drink the nectar of the message. For example, Naisha Tarkena Mathirapaneya does not just say this is not to be obtained merely by argumentation. It also says, for a little of what you study, spend 10 times time in being with that teaching. Don't close the book and run away to read a newspaper, watch TV or phone up somebody, answer some email. These days we have more distractions than before. As Gurudev Chinmayananji said, the tragedy of our civilization is decreasing happiness amidst increasing comforts. We have now handheld gadgets. Karlo mutti, Karlo duniya mutti mein. Karlo duniya mutti mein. So with the smartphone or something, you literally, yesterday some of us driving down from Ahmedabad to Ambaji, so we had a smartphone in our hand. We tried to see where is this Ambaji, because for me it was confusing that they say it is near Mount Abu, but then these Gujaratis say everything is in Gujarat. They don't trust Gujaratis so easily, I said. Apan ko, South Indians doubt everything. Finally accept defeat. So I clicked, let me see, is it true? It's just on the border, about to fall that side. I have a suspicion that Ambaji was about to slip into Rajasthan, but some Gujarati went and hold it. खींच लिया उसको. अम्मा माँ मत जाओ. माँ का साड़ी पकड़ के कुछ किया इन लोगों ने, ये लोग छोड़ते नहीं. अम्मा को अपने पास रख लिया. So in that it was amazing. It not only showed the complete, handheld smartphone, it shows where is Mount Abu, where is Abu Road, where is Ambaji, and though we did not imagine, we did not expect, it also showed one blue arrow, and then we understood that is where our car was, and it is moving. After some time it is up. So it is that GPS or satellite connection, it found out where you are. We are asking who am I, but it is answering where you are. I wish the smartphones answer who you are. Last week on Republic Day in Rajghat, Varanasi, a fellow teacher in school told me that one Russian dignitary, high placed dignitary, maybe went to America, but he did not know any English. So he was a bit nervous, and he came to know Obama himself is receiving him. Maybe he had some extra merit. He said, Obama is receiving me, and if he asks me something in English, or if I am supposed to ask something, I don't know any English. So somebody told him, it's very simple, you ask. Just ask, shake hands with Obama and ask, how are you? And he will say, I am very fine. Then immediately say, so am I. And then keep quiet. Rest of it just smile, keep smiling. So he learnt, okay, I am going to ask, how are you? He will say, very fine, and I will say, so am I. But in the process, in the some 7, 8 hours, 9 hours flight, whatever, when he landed in Washington DC and Obama came and received, instead of asking, how are you, this Russian asked, who are you? And Obama also should have said, I am Obama. But I don't know what meditation Obama was doing every morning. He said, I am Michelle's husband. And this Russian said, so am I. किसको am I? कौन हो आप? हम मिशेल के पति हैं, हम भी वही है। ये कैसे होगा? सो कर लो दुनिया मुट्ठी में। So we have all this. Swamiji said, Chinmayanand ji, increasing comforts but decreasing happiness. Why? For, as the Gita is saying, we are caught in thought. I was saying, Naisha tarkena matirapaneya. It has this very, very important message. No matter how much professional pressure you have, how much of responsibilities you have, and no matter how much you love Gita and Upanishad and Ramayana and whatever, for a little of tarka, little of studying, arguing, logically interpreting something, for a little of that you do, which is okay, do meditate. Or if the word meditation is not all that significant for you, in fact, more precisely, the simplest way of putting it is, for an ounce of whatever you do, spend a pound 10, 16 times, right? For an ounce of study or anything you do, can you spend a pound of time in not doing anything? चुप बैठना सीखो। अंत में अध्यात्म में बहुत करने की बात नहीं। It is the ability to stay alert but quiet. For if we are going on thinking and doing and talking and writing and this and that and bhuktaye natu muktaye, the world will respect us. Great scholar, oh what a great singer, oh what a great speaker, what a great dancer, what a great cook, what a society will praise you, but you will not have peace. If you want peace, for a little of doing, thinking, speaking, right, do if not 16 times, equal 1:1 तो करो. 23 minutes you studied, then close the book, don't rush to do something, sit 23 minutes without doing anything, then maybe you will have the wisdom. Otherwise, the first 23 minutes of reading or writing, that is tarka. Naisha tarkena mathirapaneya. The other 23 minutes of sitting quiet, in a manner of saying, we said it is something to be done. In fact, it is not so much about a particular duration of time, but in a manner of saying, we say sit for some time. We will pause here for this session. Are there a question or two? Please feel free. Question or two or a comment, anything and everything. Don't be hesitant that it's a very silly question. Silly question may help more than profound questions. And yeah.
The progress has been made by so-called dynamic people.
Yeah.
Scientists or statesmen, we become all self-content and may be very good for my individual peace.
Yeah.
May not be good for the society and civilization.
Well, so the question is, if we are sitting quietly and we are able to thereby experience some peace, it may be good for me, no doubt, but of what use is it to the society? So balance it, balance it. Therefore, in Ramana Gita, Ramana Maharshi has said at a certain place, Shakti and Shanti. He talks about these two. He says, for the benefit of society, exactly what you raised, for the benefit of society, have Shakti, and for your own benefit, have Shanti. You need to have both. You use the word dynamism and peace. Maharshi Ramana uses the word Shakti and Shanti. So balance it out. दोनों जरूरी है. In fact, what is more beautiful is only when you balance it, each of the domains goes to a greater height. That is, suppose you are able to contribute to the society, you are able to do something for the world by activity. The more peace you have, that activity also will get a greater shine. That activity is likely to become more creative activity. Otherwise, you are likely to just repeat what you always knew. A singer might go around and sing pretty much the same songs. But if a singer, let us say in her own way, is spiritually awakened, is spiritually touched, then some kind of new songs will come out of her, or she will sing out of a new passion, because just now she has taken a dip in the waters of peace. And the same way, the more you achieve, your meditation becomes more meaningful, because you enter meditation with a sense of fulfillment, sense of satisfaction. Suppose you just now fed some orphans, just now you taught some teacher some subject which you know, some students, just now you cleared some account problem of somebody with your knowledge of finance, doesn't matter which any field, you have done something for the society. There is a sense of fulfillment, and then you pick up an Upanishad and you read a line. Since your heart is free of conflict, your heart has a sense of satisfaction, today I did some good work, you are likely to go deeper. Therefore, in fact, both these are complementary. So, we do not mean to neglect dynamism, but the message that we touched upon was not to get stuck with this do. Night 11:30 you are a dying duck, and then you see, I didn't read today's newspaper, thoda pad lete hain. This is how the workaholics. 5 minutes you are likely to stay awake now, at least those 5 minutes say, let me do some japa. So one has to balance activity and quietude, both are necessary. Yeah.
Ramakrishna Paramahansa used to say, first reform yourself, first realize
Right.
and then do social work.
Very right. Yeah.
Otherwise you are likely to spread confusion.
Right. See, that is the higher teaching. His own disciple Vivekananda, there is a record, he must have said 100 times, but there is one record especially, he makes 2 young people monks. Because Vivekananda established the mission, Ramakrishna did not form any organization. Vivekananda established the mission and caught hold of many young people, made them monks. So there is one document where 2 young monks say to him, and maybe they quoted Ramakrishna also, they said to him, sir, we are not very clear about lot of things, why are you asking us to go around and teach? Vivekananda doesn't spare them. He says, you must, no matter how little you know, you must go teach, carry it to every village, every nook and corner, and so on. And Swami Chinmayananji also very vehemently, in one, for a long time I had that cassette with me, I don't know, I lost it now. One talk he gave either to my batch or to another batch, maybe the batch that I taught. He gave a talk in which he says, he used to speak very forcefully. It doesn't matter if you drop dead while teaching Gita in nooks and corners of the country. Carry Gita and go to villages and keep teaching. It doesn't matter if you drop dead in the process. He was emphatic. So Vivekananda, Chinmayananda are emphatic. Now to answer the question, what Sri Ramakrishna said is the higher truth. Really, one must finish one's ego and then go. But the lower truth of do prachar and your moksha, you keep it pending. We will see later. This is a lower teaching, but that has the justification. It's a very peculiar, it's an eternal debate actually. The peculiar justification it has is, the ground reality is you cannot finish your ego. If you say I am going to meditate and clear my ego first, you will in fact slip into a worse thing. In fact, there are many case studies, some brahmacharis or brahmacharinis who said that no, I don't want to teach. And therefore, they thought they would go to some corner, they would meditate. But very soon they got caught in a lot of worldly things. Were so enmeshed in worldly things, marriage or no marriage, some business, some financial, some this. Then there was neither moksha nor even a little of Gita or Upanishad. It was years before they could know what was happening. So it is the issue of fitness. It appears that most people are not fit for that higher teaching, which is true. So is the case with J. Krishnamurti's teachings. When he vehemently condemns all prachar, he calls spiritual retreats and ashrams etc. as concentration camps. He uses very strong negative, very vehement. It is true. In not concentration camp, but that criticism of what are you doing? You are not clear first, but you sit on a high stage and say to people, you are Brahman, I am Brahman. You come down the stage and ask how is the fundraising. So Krishnamurti used to vehemently criticize this. So he is right. But the point is, even in Krishnamurti Foundation itself, there is hardly anybody who is clear. By avoiding Gita and Upanishad, they did not become clear. And you and I, by embracing Gita and Upanishad, we have not become clear. Either way, those who worship the idols did not reach anywhere by and large, and those who criticized the idol worship and kept away, did they reach anywhere? They also bhatakte rahe. So this is an eternal debate. So what should we do? Should we worship idols or not? Yeah.
Moderation and balancing.
Yeah. Madhyama marga. Right. So take a little of Ramakrishna and take a little or more of Vivekananda. Take a little of Krishnamurti because there was a fire in him, but don't take him literally. He was so high. He criticized everything, sense of belonging. Don't belong to any organization, he said. But not a single trustee of Krishnamurti Foundation is able to drop her or his identification with the properties of Krishnamurti Foundation. You ask for 1 square foot, they will not give. They will have their own justification, because attachment doesn't go by simply repeating statements. Terribly attached, terribly. Leave alone for rich people, for starving masses also the organization would not give a piece of land. Yeah.
sense of slightest pressure also with respect to any activity.
Slightest
Pressure.
the slightest pressure on
With respect to any action,
Yeah.
any activity.
hmm,
It makes me completely, like, it makes me bored with the whole thing.
Yeah.
So what is the...
it's not the pressure which is causing that, it's your resistance to pressure. You should learn to go with the flow. So it is your conditioning. I don't want to be pressurized. The pressure is not good. Suppose somebody puts pressure on you, it's definitely not good. That is their problem. But then if you feel bored, or if somebody else like you in your position feels like reacting, now that is another problem on your side now. If you are truly sattvic, then you will not either react or feel bored, but you will do Krishnarpanam, offer it to the Lord and do it lovingly. Therefore, let God take care of them, but you should take care of your part. Why am I reacting, resisting? In fact, we see that with children also. Suppose under some threat we make a child do something, the child clearly shows it on the face. The child shows the lack of interest, whereas you and I adults don't show openly, but we suffer inside. The fact is, no, none of us wants to be told what to do. When we are told what to do, you must do this, don't ask questions, then we suffer. So while it is once more not correct for those other party to tell us, do it, don't ask questions, it's a kind of exploitation. True, that is true, that's their problem. But on our part, we need to see this reaction and this tremendous unwillingness. Suppose somebody forces me to teach Sanskrit to a group of people, and I say that he had no business to tell me to teach. If I want to teach, I will teach at my own sweet will, like this. Now, I love Sanskrit teaching, I do it, something lovable, but because my mind is so strongly reacting to this person, that day I won't enjoy teaching Sanskrit. So I need to wash my mind clean of this reaction and teach lovingly, and then find, like Mahatma Gandhi and others did, sattvic, non-violent ways to resist this, resist evil. Even J. Krishnamurti used to always say, don't live in conflict. Either do it wholeheartedly, or stand up to that person and say, I won't do. Wholeheartedly resist. But most of us, neither resist nor do. We do a little and look around, nobody is there, we stop it. We play games, we suffer, in the process we suffer. But so I guess boredom also is because of certain conditionings within us which need to be washed. 5:30? Yeah.
All the worldly things including the body are within the domain of LMT, LMT.
Length, mass and time. Yeah.
And self is immaterial.
Correct.
What about some mind and intellect?
Mind and intellect are have time, T. But physics has added, what is that? Some magnetic flux, etc. They are additional dimensions. For ordinary physics, LMT are enough. But then electromagnetic waves, etc., they have some more components. I think electric field or something. Some other day in a class I said, one boy said, and that something more. So coming to your question, mind and intellect are in time, but first of all, mind and intellect are not in the purview of physics. LMT is what we call the purview of physics. Yeah. LMT is in the domain of physics. Mind and intellect are not in the domain of physics. They are first in the domain of psychology, and then they are in the domain of spirituality. So there this doesn't. ओम शांति शांति शांति। आई थिंक 7 ओनली करना होगा, 5:30 हो गया एज पर शेड्यूल 7।